Hey everyone, welcome to Lurking Shadows. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Here, we explore the darkest and most spine-chilling real-life horror stories out there. For those of you returning, it's great to have you back, my friends. In today's video, we're diving into unsettling tales of being home alone. From eerie noises in the dead of night to shadowy figures that make your heart race. These stories are as mysterious as they are terrifying. The quiet comfort of home can hide a darkness that's not easily explained. If you've been here for a while, hold on tight, as I'm already working on fresh new stories that will haunt you. And if you're just joining us, thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy these tales as much as I did in gathering and sharing them. Remember, viewer discretion is advised. I'm 42 now, but back in 2012, I was 38, living alone in a modest two-story house in Rock Hill, South Carolina. It was one of those older homes, built in the 70s, with creaky floors and an attic that I rarely bothered with. I'd bought it after my divorce, wanting a fresh start away from the chaos of shared custody and bitter arguments. My kids, two boys aged 12 and 14, stayed with me every other weekend, but most nights, it was just me, the silence, and whatever late-night TV show I could find to drown out the emptiness. I worked as a nurse at the local hospital, pulling long shifts that left me exhausted, so being home alone never really bothered me much. At least, not until that summer. It started small, the kind of things you brush off as your imagination or the house settling. I'd come home from a 12-hour shift, kick off my shoes in the foyer, and head straight to the kitchen for a microwave dinner. One evening in late June, I noticed the pantry door slightly ajar. I could have sworn I'd closed it that morning, but hey, I was tired. Maybe I forgot. Inside, a bag of chips I'd bought the day before was open, crumbs scattered on the shelf. Damn mice, I muttered to myself, though we didn't have a rodent problem that I knew of. I cleaned it up, shut the door firmly, and went about my night. A few days later, it happened again. This time, it was a half-eaten apple on the counter, browning at the edges like it had been bitten into and left there. I stared at it for a minute, my heart picking up a bit. I hadn't eaten an apple in weeks. The boys weren't due for another visit, and no one else had a key. I checked the doors locked, windows secure. I even walked around the house outside, peering into the bushes, but nothing seemed amiss. Probably just sleep-deprived, I told myself, tossing the apple in the trash. But that night, as I lay in bed, the ceiling above me creaked more than usual. Old houses do that, right? Expansion from the heat. I turned on the fan for white noise and tried to sleep. The creaks became a pattern. Every night around 2 a.m., when the world outside was dead quiet, I'd hear them, soft, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth in the attic directly above my bedroom. At first, I thought it was animals. Squirrels or possums getting in through a loose vent. I called a pest control guy, some local outfit recommended by a coworker. He came out, climbed up into the attic with his flashlight, and spent a good half-hour poking around. When he came down, he shook his head. No signs of critters up there, ma'am. No droppings, no nests, nothing chewed. Attic's clean as a whistle. Maybe it's just the wood shifting. He charged me $150 for the inspection and left. I felt a little foolish, but relieved. That night, the footsteps returned, slower this time, like whatever was up there was listening, waiting. By mid-July, the missing food escalated. Entire cans of soup gone from the cupboard, a loaf of bread reduced to a few slices overnight, even my hidden stash of chocolate in the freezer, nibbled on. I started locking the kitchen cabinets with child-proof latches, the kind I'd used when the boys were toddlers. It didn't help. One morning, I found one of the latches broken, snapped clean off. My pulse raced as I stood there in my robe, staring at the damage. This wasn't animals. Animals don't break locks. I called the police that day, non-emergency line. 2 officers showed up, a young guy and an older woman. They walked through the house, checked the attic access, a pull-down ladder in the hallway, and found nothing. No forced entry, ma'am. Could be neighborhood kids sneaking in? You got any enemies from the divorce? I shook my head, feeling dismissed. They suggested installing cameras, which I did that weekend. Cheap motion-activated ones from Walmart, pointed at the kitchen and hallway. The first night with the cameras, I barely slept. I kept my phone beside me, app open, waiting for alerts. Around midnight, one pinged, motion in the hallway. I bolted upright, heart hammering, and checked the feed. Nothing. Just shadows from the streetlight filtering through the curtains. False alarm, I thought. But then, at 3 a.m., another alert from the kitchen. I swiped to view, and there it was, a faint shadow moving across the floor, elongated and human-like, disappearing toward the hallway. No clear figure, just that shape. I froze in bed, listening. Above me, the footsteps started again, heavier now, like boots on wood. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but the battery died right then, plugged in, but dead. Panic set in. I unplugged and replugged the charger, nothing. The house felt colder, the air thicker. I didn't move until dawn. The next day, I reviewed the footage obsessively at work during breaks. Colleagues noticed I was jumpy, bags under my eyes. "You okay, Tracy?" one asked. I nodded, but inside, dread was building. That evening, I armed myself with a baseball bat from the garage, the one my ex had left behind. I sat in the living room, lights on, TV blaring to mask any sounds. But I couldn't ignore it when the attic groaned again. This time, it wasn't just footsteps. There was a scratching, like nails on wood, rhythmic and insistent. I climbed the stepladder to the attic hatch, bat in hand, my breath shallow. "Hello," I called out, voice trembling. Silence. I pushed the hatch open, shone my flashlight up. Dust motes danced in the beam, illuminating boxes of Christmas decorations, old furniture, insulation fluff. Nothing out of place. I climbed up fully, sweat beading on my forehead despite the heat. The attic was stifling, air heavy with that musty smell. I swept the light around, empty. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something. A small pile of wrappers in the corner, candy bars I'd bought weeks ago, empty cans tucked behind a beam. My stomach dropped. Someone had been here. Living here. I scrambled down, locked the hatch with a padlock I'd bought that day, and called the police again. Same officers. They went up, saw the trash. "Looks like vagrancy," the older one said. "Homeless maybe. We'll dust for prints." They took samples, but warned me it could take weeks. "Stay with a friend tonight," the young one suggested. I didn't. Stubborn, I guess. Or maybe denial. That night, the banging started. Not subtle creaks, full-on thuds against the attic floor, like someone stomping in rage. The padlock rattled. I huddled in my bed, back clutched, phone charged this time. 911 on speed dial. The thuds stopped around 4 a.m., replaced by whispers, faint, indistinguishable words filtering through the vents. Was it Tracy? Or hungry? I couldn't tell. Paranoia gripped me. Every shadow in the room looked like a figure, every creak a step closer. Weeks dragged on like this. The police found prints, matched to James Franklin Jr., my ex-husband's nephew, a 57-year-old with a history of petty theft and drug issues. He'd been released from prison recently, no fixed address. But they couldn't find him. "He's probably moved on," they said. I didn't believe it. Food kept disappearing, even with the locks. I'd wake to find my refrigerator door open, milk spilled. Once, my toothbrush was wet when I hadn't used it. The cameras caught glimpses, a hand reaching into frame, a foot vanishing around a corner. Always just out of full view. Isolation set in. I stopped inviting friends over, lied to my kids about why they couldn't visit. "House is being fumigated," I said. Work suffered. I called in sick, too terrified to leave the house empty. One night in August, the power went out. Storm raging outside, thunder masking sounds. I lit candles, sat in the dark living room, bat across my lap. The attic hatch rattled violently, padlock straining. Then a crash, wood splintering. He was breaking through. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, backed into a corner. Footsteps descended the ladder, slow and deliberate. I heard breathing, raspy, labored. A silhouette appeared in the hallway, tall and gaunt, eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Tracy," he whispered, voice like gravel. I just needed a place. Family helps family. It was him, James. Filthy clothes, matted hair, nails long and dirty from scratching. He'd been watching me through the vents, learning my routine, waiting. I lunged, knife raised, but he grabbed my wrist, twisting. Pain shot up my arm. We struggled, knocking over chairs, candles flickering wildly. Shadows danced like demons on the walls. He pinned me against the counter, breath hot on my face, reek of sweat and decay. "You should have left food out," he hissed. Made it easier. "I need him," broke free, ran for the front door. He pursued, footsteps thundering. I flung the door open, screamed into the storm. Neighbors' lights flicked on. He hesitated, then retreated back upstairs. Police arrived minutes later, sirens piercing the rain. They stormed the attic, found his nest. Blankets stolen from my linen closet, empty food wrappers, even my missing diary with pages torn out. James was cornered behind the chimney, arrested without resistance. Turns out he'd pried open an exterior vent months ago, slipped in while I was at work. Lived off my scraps, watched me sleep through peepholes he'd drilled. The whispers? Him talking to himself, descending into madness from isolation up there. I sold the house shortly after, moved to an apartment with security. But even now, alone at night, I hear creaks and wonder. Is it the building settling? Or someone watching? The dread never fully leaves. It's etched into my bones, a constant reminder that home isn't always safe. I'm Tina, and back in 1986, I was just 15, living in Pepperell, Massachusetts, with my dad Frank, my sister Karen, who was 17, and for a short time before she passed, my mom. She died of cancer that year, leaving us shattered. The house was an old two-story place on a quiet street, with creaky wooden floors and walls that seemed to hold secrets from decades past. After Mom's death, Dad worked long hours at his job, often leaving Karen and me home alone after school. We'd try to keep things normal, homework, TV, frozen dinners, but the emptiness echoed. I never imagined that emptiness hid something far worse, something alive and watching. It started innocently enough. One day in the fall of '86, the phone rang while I was alone in the kitchen, stirring macaroni on the stove. I picked up, and a boy's voice asked if I was Tina. He said his name was Danny, a friend of a friend, and he sounded nice enough, charming even. We talked for a bit about school, movies, the usual teen stuff. He asked me out on a date, and I said yes, figuring why not. Dad was okay with it, as long as we met in public. But when Danny showed up at the ice cream parlor, he looked off. His clothes were dirty, hair unkempt, like he hadn't showered in days. The date was awkward. He stared too much, asked weird questions about our house, like how many rooms it had. I politely ended it early and told him I wasn't interested. He seemed disappointed but nodded and left. I thought that was the end of it. Little did I know, it was just the beginning. A few weeks later, strange things started happening. Karen and I were home alone one evening, Dad at a late shift. We were in the living room watching The Cosby Show, trying to laugh like normal when we heard a knock from inside the wall. It was faint at first, like knuckles rapping on wood, coming from behind the TV. We froze, exchanging glances. What was that? Karen whispered. I shrugged, heart skipping a beat. Probably the house settling. Old pipes or something. But it happened again, 3 deliberate knocks. We got up, pressed our ears to the wall, but nothing. We laughed it off nervously and turned up the volume. That night, as I lay in bed, the knocks returned, this time from the wall beside my headboard. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled the covers over my head, telling myself it was imagination, grief playing tricks. The knocks became a nightly ritual. Always when we were alone, never when Dad was home. We'd hear them migrating, kitchen wall during dinner prep, bathroom while brushing teeth, even the closet in my room. One afternoon, I came home from school to find my bedroom in disarray. Drawers slightly open, clothes rumpled like someone had rifled through them. My diary, which I kept hidden under the mattress, was on the bed, pages flipped. Nothing missing, but the violation sent chills down my spine. Karen, did you go through my stuff? I accused her later. She swore no, looking as puzzled as me. We told Dad, but he chalked it up to us being forgetful, still mourning Mom. Girls, lock your doors when you leave, he said, installing better latches. But the intrusions escalated. Food started disappearing. I'd buy a pack of Oreos, hide them in the pantry, and find half gone the next day, crumbs on the shelf. Milk cartons emptied overnight, even though no one drank them. Once, a whole chicken from the fridge vanished, bones later found gnawed and tucked behind the couch. Rats, Karen suggested, but we set traps and caught nothing. The smells came next, a faint, musky odor, like unwashed clothes and sweat, wafting from vents. We'd spray air freshener, but it persisted. Then the messages. One morning, I found words scrawled in crayon on my mirror. I'm watching you. I screamed, scrubbing it off before Dad saw, thinking Karen was pranking me. But she denied it, her face pale. Similar notes appeared, slipped under doors, hidden in books. Pretty Tina, miss you. Paranoia set in. We'd huddle together at night, lights on, jumping at every creak. By early 1987, the activity intensified. Objects moved on their own. I'd leave my hairbrush on the dresser, come back to find it on the floor. Karen's jewelry box emptied, pieces rearranged into shapes on her bed, a heart, once a face. We heard whispers now, muffled voices through the walls, indistinguishable but human. "Tina, Karen," it seemed to say. One night, home alone while Dad was out with friends, we were in the kitchen making popcorn when the power flickered. In the dim light, we saw a shadow dart across the hallway, tall, thin, vanishing into the stairs. "Did you see that?" I gasped. Karen nodded, grabbing a knife from the drawer. We searched the house, hearts pounding, but found no one. Doors locked, windows secure. That was the night we started sleeping in the same room, barricading the door with a chair. The isolation gnawed at us. We stopped inviting friends over, afraid they'd think we were crazy. School became an escape, but even there, I'd feel eyes on me, turning to see no one. Dad noticed our jumpiness, suggested counseling for grief, but we knew it wasn't that. One weekend, Dad took us to a movie to cheer us up, but coming home, the front door was ajar. Inside, chaos. Furniture shifted, pictures askew, and in the living room, a message painted on the wall in what looked like ketchup. "Home sweet home." Dad called the police that time. Officers came, dusted for prints, found smudges but no matches. "Probably kids vandalizing," they said. "Change your locks." We did, but it didn't stop. The climax came on a chilly afternoon in 1987. Dad was home unusually early, Karen and I in our room studying. I heard Dad yell from downstairs, then footsteps thundering. I rushed out to see him at my closet door, face ashen. "Girls, get out now," he shouted. But before we could, the closet burst open. There he was, Danny LaPlante, the boy from the date. His face smeared with ketchup and mayonnaise like war paint, hair spiked wildly, eyes manic. In his hands, Dad's hatchet from the garage and a wrench. He looked feral, emaciated from months, years, of hiding. "Don't move," he growled, voice raspy from disuse. We screamed, backing away. Dad lunged, slamming the door on him, yelling for us to run to the bedroom. We barricaded ourselves in, hearts exploding in our chests. LaPlante banged on the door, hatchet thudding into wood, splintering it. "Tina, I just wanted to be close," he wailed, voice cracking with delusion. I could smell him through the cracks, that same musky stench. Karen sobbed. Dad held us tight. I spotted the window, second story, but desperate. "Jump," Dad urged. I did, landing hard on the grass below, pain shooting up my leg, but I ran, limping to the neighbors, pounding on their door. "Call the police. There's someone in our house." Cops arrived, sirens blaring, storming in. They pulled Dad and Karen out, but searched and found no one. "He must have escaped," an officer said. But then, probing the walls, they discovered it, a network of crawl spaces, hidden tunnels between studs, barely wide enough for a person. Insulation pushed aside, peepholes drilled into rooms, my bedroom, the bathroom, kitchen. In one cavity, his lair, blankets stolen from our linen closet, empty food wrappers, a bucket for waste. He'd been living there, watching us shower, eat, sleep. For over a year, possibly 3, according to later investigations. He'd enter through a loose basement vent while we were out, survive on our scraps, torment us for twisted amusement or obsession. LaPlante fled that day, but was caught later, after more burglaries and, horrifically, the murder of a pregnant woman and her 2 kids in a nearby town. He got life sentences. We moved immediately, never returning to that house. But the dread lingers. Every knock, every shadow, I wonder, is someone watching? The walls in any home feel thinner now, hiding potential horrors. Being alone. It's a nightmare I relive, the boy in the walls forever etched in my mind. I'm Maria Broadus, and in 2014, my husband Derek and I thought we'd finally found our dream home at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. It was a stunning 6-bedroom Dutch colonial, built in 1905, with grand columns, hardwood floors that gleamed under chandelier light, and a backyard perfect for our 3 young kids to play. Westfield was my hometown, safe, suburban, the kind of place where families thrived without a second thought to danger. We closed on the house in June, paying over $1.3 million. Our savings poured into this symbol of success. But from the start, something felt off, like the walls held a secret grudge. We hadn't even fully moved in yet, still renovating while staying at my parents' nearby. Derek and I would come over alone sometimes to oversee painters or measure for curtains. Those solo visits, they became my nightmare, a creeping terror that isolation amplified into something unbearable. It began with the first letter, arriving just 3 days after closing. I was alone that afternoon, the kids at a playdate, Derek at work in Manhattan. The house was empty save for the echo of my footsteps on the bare floors. I was in the kitchen, wiping down counters still dusty from construction, when I checked the mailbox out front. Amid bills and junk mail, a thick white envelope stood out. No stamp, no return address, just our names typed neatly. Curious, I opened it right there on the porch, the summer sun beating down. The words inside chilled me despite the heat. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. It seemed polite at first, but then, 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. My hands trembled as I read on. Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. It signed off, the Watcher. I stood frozen on the steps, glancing around the quiet street. Neighbors' homes looked idyllic, manicured lawns, kids' bikes in driveways, but suddenly, every window felt like an eye staring back. Was someone watching me right then? I hurried inside, locking the door, my heart pounding. The house felt larger, emptier, shadows pooling in corners where furniture hadn't arrived yet. I called Derek immediately, reading him the letter over the phone. It's probably some crank neighbor pissed about the renovations, he said, trying to sound calm. But his voice wavered. We reported it to the police that evening, but the officer just shrugged. Anonymous letters aren't illegal unless there's a threat. No fingerprints, no leads. We tried to brush it off, focusing on the move. But that night, alone in bed at my parents', I couldn't sleep, imagining eyes peering through our new windows. A few weeks later, the second letter came. This time, Derek was out of town on business, and I was at the house alone after dropping the kids at school. I'd come to check on the painters, who had left early. The air smelled of fresh varnish, but underneath, a faint mustiness lingered, like old secrets seeping from the woodwork. I found the envelope in the mailbox again, same style. My stomach knotted as I tore it open in the foyer, door still ajar behind me. Welcome again to your new home at 657 Boulevard. The workers have been busy, and I have been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time they will. It knew about our renovations. Then horror. I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often. It listed our children's names, our kids aged 5, 8, and 10. Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. Signed, the Watcher. Terror gripped me like ice water. How did it know their names? We'd only mentioned them casually to contractors. I slammed the door, bolted it, and backed away, scanning the empty rooms. The house creaked, settling or something more. I ran upstairs, checking each bedroom window, curtainless, exposed. From the kids' rooms, you could see the street, neighbors' houses. Anyone could watch. Paranoia surged. I imagined binoculars trained on me, a figure in shadows noting my every move. I called the police again, voice shaking. They came, took the letter, but again, no actionable threat. Could be a prank, one said. But I knew better. That afternoon, alone, I sat in the master bedroom, knees drawn up, listening to the silence. Every car passing outside made me jump. Was the Watcher driving by? Living next door. I didn't leave until Derek called, insisting I go home. But home now felt tainted. The letters kept coming, each more invasive. The third arrived while I was alone one evening, kids with Derek at soccer practice. I'd stayed to unpack boxes in the living room, trying to make the place feel ours. Twilight fell, shadows lengthening across the floor. The envelope was there, waiting. Where have you gone to 657 Boulevard? It cries from the loss of life inside of it. 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to return. It accused us of ruining the house with changes. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy. Then, all of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I pass by many eyes in my life. I am the one who protects and watches over 657 Boulevard. My breath caught. It implied being everywhere, invisible. I dropped the letter, hands clammy, and paced the room. The house felt alive, walls closing in. I checked locks obsessively, peering out windows. A neighbor walked their dog. Was it them? The mailman earlier. Suspicious? Isolation hit hard. I was alone with this dread, no one to share the immediate fear. We hired a private investigator, former FBI agent. He staked out the house, but found nothing. We learned the previous owners, the Woods family, had received a similar letter just before selling, but dismissed it as harmless. Why didn't they tell us? We sued them for fraud, but it dragged on, adding stress. Meanwhile, the watcher escalated. One night, Derek was away again, and I foolishly decided to stay overnight at 657 to face it. Kids safe with grandparents. I armed myself with a flashlight and pepper spray, lights on in every room. Around midnight, as rain pattered the roof, I heard a faint knock, not at the door, but from outside a window. Heart racing, I crept to the kitchen, peering out. Nothing but darkness. Then, another letter appeared days later. Have you found all the secrets it holds? Will the young blood play in the basement? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Graphic dread washed over me. Visions of my children trapped, screaming unheard. Paranoia consumed us. We'd drive by the house at odd hours, watching for watchers. Neighbors gossiped. Some accused us of fabricating for attention. One theory, a neighbor with a grudge over property lines. We installed cameras, floodlights. But alone there, I'd feel eyes boring into me, an uncanny presence. Once, unpacking alone, I found an old photo in a drawer, not ours, of the house in the 20s, with a shadowy figure in a window. Coincidence? Or planted? The watcher referenced history, tying into real estate records of the home's past owners. Sleep evaded me. I'd lie awake, hearing whispers in the wind, imagining footsteps outside. By 2015, we couldn't move in. The house sat empty, a monument to fear. We tried renting it, but tenants fled after letters. The watcher warned, maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away but makes you feel sick day after day. Doom felt inevitable. We listed it for sale, losing hundreds of thousands. Media frenzy hit after our story leaked. New York Magazine detailed it all, amplifying scrutiny. Strangers drove by gawking. Alone at night, I'd dream of eyes in walls, waking sweat-soaked. In 2019, we sold at a loss to a young couple who knew the history but dismissed it. No letters since, but the watcher remains unsolved. DNA from envelopes inconclusive, suspects cleared. Police theorized a hoax, but we know the terror was real. Now in a new home, I still check mail warily, glance over shoulders. Being alone, it's a void where paranoia creeps, reminding me some eyes never blink. I'm Ellen, and in 1998, I was 27, living alone in a small rental house in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a sleepy town along the Ohio River. The place was a single-story bungalow, nothing fancy. Peeling paint, a sagging porch, and a crawlspace beneath that smelled of damp earth. I'd moved there after a bad breakup, needing somewhere cheap to start over while I worked as a cashier at the local supermarket. The house suited me fine. It was just me, my cat Sable, and the quiet of a town where nothing much happened. Or so I thought. Point Pleasant had its own dark history. Stories of the Mothman, a winged creature tied to the 1967 Silver Bridge collapse that killed 46 people. I dismissed those as folklore, tourist bait for the annual festival. But being alone in that house, especially at night, started to unravel something sinister, something that felt like it was watching, waiting, whispering. It began in late October, when the evenings turned crisp and the trees shed their leaves, piling up against my porch. I'd come home from a closing shift, bone-tired, and notice small things out of place. A coffee mug I'd left on the counter would be in the sink, rinsed clean. My bedroom window, which I always locked, would be cracked open, letting in a chilly draft. I blamed Sable at first. She was a curious cat, always knocking things over, but she couldn't open windows. One night, I found my back door ajar, just an inch, the deadbolt undone. My heart skipped. I lived alone, and no one had a spare key. I checked the yard, flashlight shaking in my hand, but saw nothing but shadows dancing in the wind. I started double-checking locks, even wedging a chair under the doorknob at night. Still, the unease grew. The noises came next. I'd be in the living room, curled up with a book, Sable purring beside me, when I'd hear it, a faint scratching, like fingernails dragging across wood, coming from the floorboards. Point Pleasant's older homes often had crawl spaces, and mine was no exception, accessible through a trapdoor in the laundry room. I figured it was raccoons or stray cats, common enough in a rural town. I called a handyman, a gruff local named Ed who'd lived there his whole life. He crawled under the house, came back dusty but shaking his head. No animals, no tracks, nothing but dirt and pipes down there, Ellen. Maybe it's the wind rattling the vents. He charged me $50 and suggested sealing the trapdoor better. I did, adding a heavy padlock. That night, the scratching returned, louder, more deliberate, like something testing the wood beneath my feet. By November, things escalated. Food began disappearing. Cans of tuna, a loaf of bread, even a half-eaten pizza I'd left in the fridge. I'd find crumbs scattered on the counter, sometimes a greasy smear, like someone had wiped their hands. Sable started acting strange, hissing at the walls, her fur bristling as she stared at the heating vent in the living room. One evening, alone after a late shift, I was microwaving leftovers when I heard a new sound, a whisper, soft and garbled, coming from that same vent. It wasn't words I could make out, just a low, breathy murmur, like someone muttering to themselves. My skin prickled. I knelt by the vent, ear close, heart pounding. Nothing. Just the hum of the furnace. Get a grip, Ellen, I told myself, but I unplugged the microwave and left the kitchen dark, retreating to my bedroom with Sable. The whispers grew frequent, always when I was alone. They'd come at odd hours, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., muffled but insistent, filtering through the vents. Sometimes it sounded like my name, drawn out slow. Ellen. Other times, it was gibberish, laced with a faint chuckle that made my blood run cold. I stopped sleeping well, my eyes darting to every shadow. One night, I woke to Sable growling low, her eyes fixed on the vent above my bed. The whisper came again, clearer. I see you. I bolted upright, grabbing the flashlight I kept by my pillow. The beam swept the room, empty. But the air felt heavy, like someone had just left. I checked the trapdoor, padlock secure. Still, I shoved a bookcase over it, barricading it shut. Desperate, I borrowed a tape recorder from a coworker, setting it by the vent one night to catch the sound. I sat up, lights on, clutching a kitchen knife. Around 3 a.m., the whispers started, and I hit record. In the morning, I played it back, my hands shaking. There it was, a raspy voicemail saying, "She's alone, always alone." My stomach churned. I took the tape to the police, a small station where the officers knew everyone. They listened, frowned, but didn't take it seriously. Could be kids messing around, or maybe the furnace echoing weird. We'll patrol more, Ellen. They didn't. I felt dismissed, isolated, the house closing in like a trap. The breaking point came on a freezing night in December. I was home alone, Dad visiting his sister in Ohio for the weekend. I'd rigged a bell on the trapdoor, a makeshift alarm. Around midnight, it jingled faintly. I froze, knife in hand, staring at the laundry room door. The jingling stopped, replaced by a slow, deliberate scratching. Nails on wood, then metal, like something prying at the padlock. My breath hitched. I crept to the living room, where Sable was hissing at the vent again. Then a thud, something heavy dropping in the crawl space. The whispers came loud, almost gleeful. "Ellen, come down here." I backed away, tripping over a rug, my knife clattering to the floor. The trapdoor rattled violently, the bookcase wobbling. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, whispering frantically. "Someone's in my house. Under it. Please hurry." While waiting, I heard footsteps, not above, but below, pacing the crawl space. The air grew thick with that musky smell, now mixed with something rancid like rotting food. I barricaded myself in the bathroom, the only room without a vent, clutching Sable. The whispers followed, seeping through the walls. "You can't hide." I prayed, tears streaming, until sirens wailed outside. Police stormed in, flashlights sweeping. They forced open the trapdoor, found a man, emaciated, filthy, with wild eyes and matted hair. He was Richard Beasley, a drifter with a rap sheet for theft and trespassing, known to squat in abandoned spaces across West Virginia. He'd been living under my house for weeks, slipping in through a loose vent cover I'd never noticed, surviving on my food, watching through the vents. He'd drilled peepholes, explaining the whisper's clarity. His lair was a nest of stolen blankets, empty cans, and worst of all, Polaroids of me sleeping, taken through the bedroom vent. Beasley was arrested, charged with breaking and entering, but claimed he meant no harm, just needed a place to stay. The police found no evidence he planned worse, but the photos told a different story. I moved out the next week, crashing with a coworker until I could find a new place. The house was torn down years later, the lot left empty, as if tainted. Point Pleasant's Mothman legends felt trivial compared to this. Now, in a new apartment, I cover vents, check locks obsessively. Alone at night, every creak sounds like whispers, every shadow a figure crouching beneath. The dread lingers, a reminder that home can hide horrors you never see coming. I'm Sarah, and in 2003, I was 19, living alone in a small duplex in Amityville, New York, a town infamous for its own horror stories tied to the DeFeo murders and the Lutz family's haunted house claims from the 1970s. I'd moved there for college, renting the place cheap because of its reputation. Nobody wanted to live near that stigma. The duplex was old, with warped wooden floors, drafty windows, and a faint smell of mildew that never quite went away. I was a freshman, working part-time at a diner to cover rent, my parents an hour away in Queens. Most nights, it was just me, my textbooks, and the hum of the refrigerator. I liked the quiet, the independence. But being alone in that house, especially after dark, turned that quiet into something suffocating, something that watched me back. It started in early November, when the Long Island chill settled in, frosting the windows. I'd come home from a late shift, feet aching, and notice small things out of place. A chair in the living room slightly askew, like someone had bumped it. My bedroom door, which I always closed, ajar just a crack. I chalked it up to being scatterbrained, college stress, long hours. But one night, I found a dirty footprint on the kitchen linoleum, too big to be mine, smeared like someone had tried to wipe it away. My heart stuttered. I checked the locks, secure. No signs of a break-in. I told myself it was mud from my own sneakers, though I hadn't worn them inside. Still, I started sleeping with a baseball bat by my bed, a holdover from high school softball days. The noises came next. Late at night, when the town was dead silent, I'd hear faint taps on the windows, like fingers testing the glass. The duplex had a small backyard, overgrown with weeds, bordered by a chain-link fence. I'd peer out, flashlight in hand, but see nothing except shadows swaying in the wind. One evening, alone studying in the living room, I heard a low hum, almost like singing, coming from outside the kitchen window. It was muffled, wordless, but distinctly human, a man's voice, deep and eerie. I froze, textbook slipping to the floor. The hum stopped when I flicked on the porch light, but my pulse raced. I called my neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Connolly who lived in the other half of the duplex. "Did you hear anything outside?" I asked. She hadn't, but her voice was wary. "Be careful, Sarah. This town's got ghosts." I laughed it off, but didn't sleep that night. By December, the disturbances grew bolder. I'd find things missing, nothing major, just a granola bar from the pantry, a can of soda from the fridge. Once, my favorite scarf, left on the couch, vanished entirely. I started locking the kitchen cabinets, but one morning, the lock on one was jimmied open, a butter knife left beside it. My stomach churned. This wasn't forgetfulness. Someone was getting in. I called the police, a small Amityville department familiar with prank calls tied to the town's haunted reputation. 2 officers came, checked the house, found no forced entry. "Could be a squatter sneaking in," one suggested. "Old houses like this have crawlspaces, attics. You check those?" I hadn't. The attic access was a pull-down ladder in the hall closet, rusted and stiff. I hadn't touched it since moving in. They checked it for me. Empty, just dust and cobwebs. "Get better locks," they said, leaving me alone again. The real terror began one freezing night in January. I was home alone, parents visiting relatives in Buffalo. No classes due to a snowstorm. I was curled up on the couch, watching a grainy VHS of Clueless to calm my nerves, when the power flickered. The TV cut to static, then black. In the sudden silence, I heard it, a soft scrape, like boots on gravel, right outside the living room window. My breath caught. I crept to the window, peeling back the curtain. There, in the dim glow of a streetlight, was a face pressed against the glass. A man pale, with hollow cheeks and dark, unblinking eyes staring right at me. His lips curled into a slow smile, teeth yellowed, one missing. I screamed, stumbling back, tripping over the coffee table. The face vanished. I grabbed the bat, hands shaking, and called 911. "Someone's outside my house." I gasped. The operator told me to stay put. Police were on the way. While waiting, I heard footsteps circling the duplex, crunching snow deliberate, pausing at each window. The taps returned, now at the kitchen window, then the bedroom. I locked myself in the bathroom, bat raised, phone clutched. The footsteps stopped, but then came a new sound, a faint scratching from the ceiling, like something moving in the attic. My blood ran cold. The police had checked it, hadn't they? I held my breath, listening. The scratching turned to a thump, then silence. When the police arrived, they searched outside, found footprints in the snow circling the house, leading to the backyard fence, then disappearing. No one in the attic, no signs inside. Could be a prankster, an officer said. Kids mess around here because of the Amityville horror stuff. But the footprints were large, adult-sized, not kids. The next week, I installed motion sensor lights and a cheap security camera from Radio Shack, pointed at the backyard. The first night, it caught nothing but a stray cat. But the second night, an alert woke me at 3 a.m. I checked the grainy feed on my clunky laptop. A man, the same hollow-cheeked face, standing at the fence, staring directly at the camera. He held something, my scarf, dangling like a trophy. My heart stopped. He mouthed something, too blurry to read, then slipped into the darkness. I called the police again, showed them the tape. They recognized him. John List, a name tied to a horrific 1971 case in Westfield, not far away, where a man murdered his family and vanished for 18 years before being caught in 1989. But List was in prison, serving life. This man, a copycat, they guessed, someone obsessed with Amityville's dark history, maybe a drifter using the town's lore to terrify. The final night came in February. I was alone, snow piling outside, the house creaking under the storm's weight. I'd taken to sleeping with every light on, bat beside me. Around 2 a.m., the camera alert pinged again. The feed showed him, same face, same scarf, climbing the fence into my backyard. I grabbed the phone, dialed 911, but before I could speak, the line went dead. A thud from the attic, then another, like someone dropping onto the floorboards. My bedroom door rattled, the knob turning slowly. I backed against the wall, bat raised, screaming. "Get out!" The door stopped moving, but I heard breathing, slow, raspy, just outside. Then a whisper through the crack. "Sarah, you look so pretty scared." My name. He knew my name. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, but headlights flashed through the window. Police, thank God. They stormed in, found the attic hatch open, a rope ladder dangling. Inside, a nest of blankets, my scarf, empty food wrappers, and a knife sharpened to a wicked point. Footprints in the snow led to a nearby alley, then vanished. They never caught him. Police theorized he was a transient, drawn to Amityville's infamy, living in my attic for weeks, slipping in through a loose vent while I was at work or school. He'd watched me through peepholes, stolen my things, whispered my name to unravel me. I broke my lease, moved back to Queens with my parents. The duplex was sold, no questions asked about its history. Amityville's shadow lingers in my dreams, those eyes that smile, the whisper. Now, in a new apartment, I check windows obsessively, avoid being alone after dark. Every tap, every creak, feels like him, waiting, watching from some unseen corner of my life. I'm David, and in 1991, I was 32, living alone in a modest one-bedroom house in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, a quiet town north of Chattanooga. The place was a fixer-upper, built in the 1950s with creaky pine floors, a sloped roof, and a small basement that smelled of mildew and coal dust. I'd moved there after a layoff from my factory job, needing something affordable while I pieced my life back together as a night shift security guard. The house was isolated, set back from a winding road with woods on 3 sides, the kind of place where the nearest neighbor was a half-mile away. I liked the solitude at first. Nobody to bother me, just the hum of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. But being alone in that house, especially in the dead of night, turned that solitude into a creeping dread, a feeling that something was sharing the space, something that knew my every move. It started in late September, when the air turned crisp and the woods grew silent. I'd come home from a 2 a.m. shift, exhausted, dropping my keys on the kitchen counter and collapsing onto the couch. One morning, I noticed my coffee mug, left in the sink the night before, was on the table, clean and dry. I frowned, figuring I'd been too tired to remember washing it. But a few days later, it happened again. A plate I'd left dirty was stacked neatly in the cupboard. My heart gave a little jolt. I lived alone, no roommates, no girlfriend, nobody with a key. I checked the doors, locked, no signs of tampering. The windows were old but secure, their latches rusted shut. "Just tired," I muttered, but I started locking the kitchen door at night, a habit from my childhood. The noises came soon after. I'd be in bed, the house dark except for the glow of a streetlight filtering through the blinds, when I'd hear it, a faint thump from the basement, like something heavy shifting. Soddy Daisy had a history of odd occurrences. Locals whispered about the 1983 disappearance of a hiker in the nearby Cumberland Trail, never found, rumored to be linked to strange lights in the woods. I dismissed it as small-town gossip, but the thumps grew regular, always around 3 a.m., when I was alone and half asleep. Sometimes it was a scrape, like metal on concrete, other times a soft shuffle, like footsteps on dirt. I'd lie there, heart pounding, telling myself it was the furnace or pipes. But the basement had no furnace, just a water heater and old crates. One night, I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar from the garage, determined to check. The basement door was in the hallway, a flimsy wooden thing with a loose knob. I swung it open, the musty smell hitting me like a wave. The stairs creaked as I descended, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The basement was small, cluttered with junk from the previous owner, boxes, a rusted bike, a broken chair. Nothing moved, nothing out of place. But as I turned to leave, I saw it. A smudge on the floor, a partial handprint in the dust, too large to be mine. My stomach twisted. I bolted upstairs, locked the door, and shoved a chair against it. Sleep didn't come that night. Things escalated in October. I started finding signs of intrusion. A loaf of bread in the pantry, half-eaten, the bag twisted shut. My work boots, left by the door, moved to the living room, laces untied. Once, I came home to find my bedroom closet open, a single shirt, my favorite flannel, draped over a chair like someone had tried it on. Paranoia set in. I bought a cheap motion sensor camera from a hardware store, setting it up in the living room to face the hallway. The first night, it caught nothing but the flicker of headlights from a passing car. But the second night, at 4 a.m., the footage showed a shadow, human-shaped, fleeting, crossing the hallway toward the basement door. No face, no details, just a blur. My hands shook as I watched it on my clunky TV, rewinding over and over. Someone was in my house. I called the police the next day, showed them the tape. They were skeptical. Small-town cops used to petty theft, not this. "Could be a glitch, Dave," one said. "Or a drifter passing through. We'll check around." They searched the basement, found nothing but that same handprint, now smudged like someone tried to erase it. They suggested a better lock for the basement door, which I installed, a heavy deadbolt. But the noises didn't stop. Now it was knocks, sharp and deliberate, from the basement walls, sometimes answered by a faint tap from the attic above. The house felt alive, conspiring. I stopped sleeping, my eyes bloodshot, jumping at every sound. Work suffered. My boss warned me about dozing on the job. The terror peaked on a rainy November night. I was alone, the power flickering as a storm battered the woods. I'd taken to sleeping in the living room, closer to the front door for a quick escape. The camera was on, its red light blinking. Around midnight, the basement door rattled, the deadbolt clanking like someone was testing it. I grabbed the crowbar, heart hammering, and crept to the hallway. The rattling stopped, replaced by a low, guttural hum, like a chant, coming from below. I froze, sweat beading on my forehead. Then a new sound, a slow, deliberate scratch from the living room wall, inches from where I stood. I spun, crowbar raised, but saw nothing. The hum grew louder, joined by a whisper. "David, stay." My name, clear as day, from the basement. I backed toward the front door, eyes locked on the hallway. The camera beeped, motion detected. I didn't dare check it. The basement door shook violently, with splintering. I fumbled with the front door lock, rain pelting my face as I stumbled outside, barefoot, into the storm. I ran to my truck, locked myself in, and called 911 from my old flip phone. "Someone's in my house." I shouted, voice cracking. The operator kept me on the line until police arrived, their flashlights cutting through the downpour. They searched the house, found the basement door ajar, the deadbolt pried open. In the basement, a nest, blankets stolen from my closet, empty food cans, a knife from my kitchen, and worst of all, a Polaroid of me sleeping on the couch, taken from above. They identified the intruder as Robert Lee, a transient known in the area for squatting in abandoned homes, linked to petty thefts across Tennessee. He'd been living in my basement, accessing it through a loose vent in the foundation, slipping in while I worked nights. The whispers? him muttering, watching me through cracks in the floorboards. The photo came from a disposable camera he'd stolen from a nearby store. They caught him a week later, hiding in another vacant house, my flannel shirt in his bag. He claimed he just needed shelter, but the Polaroid told a darker story, obsession maybe worse. I moved out immediately, crashing with a coworker until I found an apartment in Chattanooga. The house was sold, no questions asked. Now, in a new place, I keep lights on at night, check locks obsessively. Every thump, every whisper in the walls brings back that night, the handprint, the voice, the face I never saw but felt always watching. Being alone isn't freedom anymore. It's a cage of fear, where every shadow could be him, waiting to reach out from the dark. I'm Lisa, and in 2007, I was 24, living alone in a cramped one-story cottage in Slidell, Louisiana, a town still scarred from Hurricane Katrina's devastation 2 years earlier. The house was a rental, cheap because of flood damage, stained walls, warped floorboards, and a lingering damp smell that clung to everything. I'd moved there for a job at a community center, helping rebuild efforts, leaving my family in Baton Rouge. The cottage was small, with a living room, a bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom that always felt too cold. I liked the independence, the chance to be on my own, but Slidell's quiet nights, broken only by the hum of cicadas, soon turned oppressive. Alone in that house, I started to feel like the walls were listening, like something was waiting for me to let my guard down. It began in early April, when the air was thick with spring humidity. I'd come home from a long day, arms full of grocery bags, and noticed small things off. A fork I'd left in the sink was on the counter, clean. My bedroom window, always locked, was unlatched, letting in a faint breeze. I blamed exhaustion. Katrina recovery work was grueling, and I was often too tired to think straight. But one evening, I found a half-eaten apple on the kitchen table, bite marks fresh, the core still wet. I froze, my pulse quickening. I hadn't bought apples in weeks. I checked the doors, locked, no scratches or pry marks. The windows were secure, too. Maybe I'm losing it, I whispered, tossing the apple in the trash. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint gurgle from the bathroom, like water moving in the pipes. Old houses make noises, I told myself, but sleep didn't come easy. The sounds grew stranger. Late at night, alone with my thoughts, I'd hear a tapping from the walls, rhythmic, like someone knocking on metal. Slidell's homes often had old plumbing, exposed pipes running through crawl spaces or walls, so I figured it was air trapped in the lines. But the taps came in patterns, 3 quick, 2 slow, always around 2 a.m. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in. One night, the tapping turned to a low moan, almost human, echoing from the bathroom. I grabbed my flashlight, heart pounding, and checked the sink, the shower. Nothing. The sound stopped when I turned on the light, but the silence felt heavier, like someone holding their breath. By May, the disturbances intensified. Food started vanishing. A bag of chips gone from the pantry, a yogurt container empty in the fridge, its foil lid crumpled on the counter. I found muddy smudges on the living room floor, too big for my size 6 shoes, smeared like someone tried to wipe them away. Panic crept in. I lived alone, no one had a key, and Slidell wasn't the kind of place where neighbors dropped by unannounced. I called a plumber, thinking the pipes might explain the noises. He was a local, weathered from years of post-Katrina repairs. He checked the crawl space under the house, came back shaking his head. Pipes are fine, no leaks, no blockages. Maybe it's settling from the flood damage. He suggested I check the attic, a small space above the bedroom I'd never explored. I didn't, too unnerved by the idea of what I might find. One evening, alone after a double shift, I was microwaving dinner when I heard a new sound, a whisper, faint but clear, coming from the bathroom vent. It was garbled, like words underwater, but I caught my name. 53SA. My skin crawled. I crept to the bathroom, flashlight shaking in my hand, and pressed my ear to the vent. Nothing now, just the hum of the house. I told myself it was the wind, but Slidell's history of post-Katrina squatters, people hiding in abandoned homes, gnawed at me. I started sleeping with a kitchen knife under my pillow, checking locks obsessively. The whispers became nightly. Always when I was alone, always from the vents, bathroom, bedroom, kitchen. Sometimes it was my name, other times phrases like "stay here" or "I'm close." I bought a cheap tape recorder from Walmart, setting it by the vent one night. At 3 a.m., the whispers came, and I hit record, heart racing. The playback chilled me, a raspy voice male saying, She's alone, she doesn't know. I took it to the Slidell police, a small station overwhelmed with post-Katrina crime. They listened, skeptical. Could be pipes echoing or kids messing around, an officer said. We'll patrol your street. They didn't find anything, but I felt their doubt, the isolation of being dismissed. I started avoiding the house, staying late at the community center, but I couldn't avoid sleeping there. One night in June, alone during a thunderstorm, I woke to a scratching sound, not from the vents but the attic. It was slow, deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. Sable, my cat from childhood who died years before, couldn't explain this. I grabbed the knife, flashlight, and crept to the hallway. The attic access was a pull-down panel above the closet, sealed with a latch I'd never touched. The scratching stopped, replaced by a heavy thud, like someone shifting their weight. My breath hitched. I called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then a whisper from the vent nearby. "Lisa, come up." My legs nearly gave out. I didn't dare open the attic. Instead, I barricaded myself in the bedroom, shoving a dresser against the door. The whispers continued, now from multiple vents overlapping. "Lisa, you're mine." I sat on the bed, knife clutched, until dawn. The next day, I called the police again, begging them to check the attic. 2 officers came, climbed up, and found nothing but insulation and dust. But as they left, one noticed a loose vent cover in the backyard, big enough for a person to crawl through. "Check this," he said, pointing. My heart sank. That vent led to the crawlspace, connected to the house's ductwork. The final night came in July, a muggy evening with no moon. I was alone, the power flickering as thunder rumbled. I'd rigged a bell on the attic hatch, a trick I'd read about. At 1 a.m., it jingled sharp and clear. My stomach dropped. The whispers started louder from every vent. "Lisa, I'm here." Then, a crash from the attic, with splintering. I grabbed the knife, ran to the living room, and heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crossing above. The attic hatch rattled, the bell clanging wildly. I dialed 911, whispering, "Someone's in my attic." The operator kept me on the line as the footsteps moved to the walls, then the crawlspace below. A new sound, metal creaking, like the vent cover being pried open. Police arrived, sirens cutting through the storm. They forced the attic hatch, found a makeshift camp, blankets stolen from my laundry, empty food wrappers, a flashlight, and a notebook with my name scrawled repeatedly, alongside sketches of my house's layout. The crawlspace held more: cigarette butts, a torn shirt, and a knife like mine, sharpened to a point. The intruder was Charles Ray, a drifter known for squatting in Katrina-damaged homes, slipping through vents to live undetected. He'd been in my house for months, watching through vents, whispering to unnerve me, feeding on my food. They caught him days later, hiding in another abandoned Slidell property, my notebook in his bag. I moved back to Baton Rouge the next week, leaving the cottage behind. It was demolished in 2008, the lot left empty. Now in a new apartment, I cover vents, check ceilings, avoid being alone at night. Every gurgle, every whisper in the pipes, brings back that voice, that presence. Home isn't a sanctuary anymore. It's a place where shadows hide, waiting to speak my name. I'm Rachel, and in 2010, I was 29, living alone in a 1-story ranch house in Roswell, New Mexico, a town steeped in UFO lore from the 1947 crash that still drew curious tourists. The house was a rental, cheap and dated, with faded stucco walls, creaky linoleum floors, and windows that rattled in the desert wind. I'd moved there for a job as a librarian at the local community college, escaping a messy breakup in Albuquerque. The solitude suited me, nights spent with books, the hum of a box fan, and the vast, starry sky outside. But being alone in that house, especially when the desert turned dark and silent, became a prison of fear, where every shadow seemed to move and every sound felt like a warning. It started in late August, when the summer heat lingered, making the house feel like an oven. I'd come home from work, kick off my shoes, and notice small disturbances. A book I'd left on the coffee table was open to a random page, its spine cracked. My kitchen trash can, always emptied, had a crumpled candy wrapper I didn't recognize. I blamed fatigue. Long hours cataloging books left me distracted. But one evening, I found a glass of water on my bedside table, half drunk, when I hadn't poured one. My heart skipped. I lived alone, no pets, no visitors. I checked the front and back doors, locked, no signs of forced entry. The windows were latched. The one in the living room felt looser than usual. Just forgetful, I told myself, but I started double-checking locks, keeping a flashlight by my bed. The noises began in September. I'd be reading in the living room, the house dark except for a single lamp, when I'd hear a faint tapping, like fingertips on glass, coming from the bedroom window. Roswell's UFO reputation made locals jumpy, and I'd heard stories of pranksters targeting newcomers, but this felt different. The taps came in threes, always after midnight, when I was alone. I'd creep to the window, heart pounding, and peer out into the desert blackness. Nothing but cacti and dust. One night, the tapping turned to a scrape, slow and deliberate, like something dragging across the glass. I flicked on the porch light, but it revealed only my reflection, and a smudge on the window, like a handprint, too big for mine. I wiped it away, hands shaking, and slept with the lights on. By October, the intrusions grew bolder. Food disappeared. A bag of pretzels gone from the pantry, a yogurt container empty in the fridge, its lid torn. I found a dirty sock in the laundry room, not mine, stiff with sweat and sand. The air in the house started to smell faintly of body odor, faint but persistent, no matter how much I cleaned. I called a handyman to check for pests, thinking maybe animals were getting in. He inspected the crawl space under the house, came back shrugging. No critters, no holes. Just old insulation and dirt. He mentioned Roswell's history of transients, people hiding in abandoned properties since the 80s. I nodded, but the idea of someone in my house made my skin crawl. I bought a cheap motion sensor camera, setting it up in the hallway to face the living room. The camera caught something the first week. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. The grainy footage showed a shadow, tall, human-shaped, moving across the living room, pausing at the kitchen door before vanishing. No face, no clear details, just a blur. My breath caught. I rewatched it, heart hammering, until dawn. I called the Roswell police, showed them the tape. They were used to UFO-related calls, not this. Could be a glitch, one officer said, or some drifter. We'll check around. They searched the house, found nothing. No footprints, no signs of entry. They suggested a deadbolt for the back door, which I installed, but the noises didn't stop. Now it was whispers, faint and raspy, coming from the air vents. Rachel, they seemed to say, always when I was alone, always at night. The whispers grew clearer, more personal. Pretty Rachel alone. I'd wake to them, muffled through the bedroom vent, my name drawn out like a taunt. I bought a tape recorder, setting it by the vent one night, knife from the kitchen under my pillow. At 2 a.m., the whispers came, and I hit record. The playback was chilling, a man's voice low and rough saying, "She's here, doesn't see me." I took it to the police, but they dismissed it as ventilation echoes, or kids playing pranks. "We'll patrol more," they promised, but I felt alone, dismissed, the house closing in like a trap. The climax came on a windy November night. I was alone, the desert howling outside, power flickering. I'd taken to sleeping in the living room, closer to the front door, camera on, knife in hand. Around 1 a.m., the camera buzzed, motion in the hallway. I checked the feed. A figure, gaunt and shadowy, stood at the bedroom door, holding something, my missing scarf, twirling it like a trophy. My heart stopped. Then, a thud from the attic, a small space I'd never checked, accessible through a hatch in the closet. The whispers came again, louder, from the vent. "Rachel, come find me." I grabbed the knife, back toward the front door, but the attic hatch rattled, wood creaking like something heavy was moving. I dialed 911, whispering, "Someone's in my house," as the hatch rattled again, louder. Footsteps thumped above, slow and deliberate, then stopped. The whispers turned to a low chuckle, echoing through the vents. I ran outside, barefoot in the cold, and waited in my car, knife clutched, until police arrived. They forced the attic hatch, found a nest, blankets stolen from my laundry, empty food wrappers, a flashlight, and worst of all, a Polaroid of me reading on the couch, taken from above. The intruder was Thomas Lee, a drifter known for squatting in Roswell's older homes, slipping through vents or loose windows. He'd been living in my attic for weeks, watching through vent peepholes, stealing my food, whispering to unnerve me. They caught him days later, hiding in a vacant house nearby, my scarf in his possession. I broke my lease, moved back to Albuquerque, crashing with friends until I found a new place. The ranch house was sold, its history buried. Now, in a new apartment, I cover vents, check windows obsessively, avoid being alone at night. Every tap, every whisper in the dark, brings back that voice, that shadow. Roswell's UFO tales feel trivial compared to this. Home isn't safe anymore. It's a place where eyes watch from above, waiting to breathe my name on the glass.